In the antechamber, 3 steps from the open doorway, the deputy minister of the Cavorian Trade Commission leaned to one of his aides and said, in his own language with the small smirk of a man who believes he has measured the room, "Tin man, they send a piece of decorative furniture who does not understand a single word we are saying." I heard it because I was meant to. I was the only man on the host's side who spoke Cavorian, and I was meant to hear nothing in it tonight. My name is Cyril Halberd. I am senior trade aide to the Chancellor of Whitmore. For 7 years before this posting, I served as a junior commercial officer in the consulate at Tasvar, on the southern coast of the Republic of Cavoria, and I learned the Cavorian tongue not from a manual, but from the long evenings of the fishing wharves and the long mornings of the customs office. I had been ordered by the Chancellor himself to keep that fact off the formal placement card and out of the briefing. The Cavorian delegation believed they were coming to a dinner at which not a single member of the host's table spoke their language. They were comfortable in that belief. The deputy minister was very comfortable in it. He had come in late, that was the first move. The trade renewal had been negotiated for 3 months. The final clause was on the table for signature in the morning, and at 20 past the hour the deputy minister of the Cavorian Trade Commission swept through the antechamber with 2 aides at his shoulder and a sash of his country's order across his chest, calculating, before he had spoken a syllable, the exact pressure of arriving late on a host who needed the deal more than he did. His name was Vasek Brel. His face was a carefully kept 50, his beard close, his eyes practical. He was not a cruel man. He was a man who had decided before he walked in that he would win the evening. At the doorway between the antechamber and the banqueting hall of the House of Whitmore, a single royal guard stood the post. Red wool tunic, brass buttons polished to a small fire, the tall black bearskin, white gloves at his sides, the rifle shouldered, the chin strap exact. He was perhaps 34, perhaps 36. His eyes were forward. His face was the face of a man who has chosen long ago that nothing on the outside of him is anyone else's business. Deputy Minister Brel saw him, registered him, and dismissed him in one glance. Then he leaned to the aide on his right and made the remark in Cavorian, at the easy conversational volume of a man saying something he is certain only his own people will hear. And then he added, with the small confidential smile of a planner laying out his pieces, "I will let them talk through the first 3 courses. At the fish, I will begin to find the renewal language unacceptable. At the cheese, I will mention a walkout. At the dessert, I will make for the door. They will follow me into the antechamber with a better offer in their teeth. We will sign at midnight on our terms." The aide nodded. The second aide behind gave a small dry laugh. Deputy Minister Brel inclined his head once toward the royal guard in the doorway. The way a man inclines his head toward a piece of furniture he is satisfied is sturdy, and walked past him into the hall. The guard did not blink. I followed 3 paces behind the delegation, with the Chancellor's principal interpreter at my elbow, a junior freshly licensed, who spoke careful textbook Cavorian and not a word of the southern dockyards. I kept my face the face I had brought to the room. I did not look at the guard as I passed him. I had been given my instructions in the Chancellor's study at 6 o'clock that evening, and I followed them. We took our places at the long table under the chandeliers. The Chancellor of Whitmore sat at the head, a man of 60, lean, deliberate, with the small, kind eyes of a person who has spent a lifetime learning when to be unkind and choosing almost always not to be. The Cavorian delegation took the seats opposite. The Whitmore delegation took the seats to the Chancellor's right and left. The doors closed. The royal guard remained at the doorway. On the inside, the only motionless figure in a hall now full of small motion, footmen with the soup, sommeliers with the first wine, the quiet hum of conversation begun. The first course was a clear consommé. Brel praised it. The second course was a fish, simply done with a sauce that the Chancellor's kitchen had been preparing for the renewal since the autumn. Brel praised it more carefully. Halfway through the fish he set down his fork and in clean, accented court tongue said that he had been studying the renewal language during the day, and that one of the clauses, the freight tariff schedule for the western ports, sat less well with his commission than he had originally indicated. The Chancellor inclined his head and said he was sorry to hear it. He said he was sure the clause could be examined. He did not look concerned. He looked exactly as he had looked through the soup. I knew, because I had watched him in negotiations for 4 years, that he was concerned. Across the table, Brel's right-hand aide caught my eye briefly. The aide was performing nothing. He believed himself to be invisible inside the language barrier. He believed me, in particular, to be a polite functionary whose only job was to nod at the interpreter's elbow. He looked away with the small impatience of a man who has more interesting people to read. The third course came. Brel had a second small disagreement, gentler, kept in reserve. The Chancellor absorbed it. The interpreter rendered the exchange in textbook Cavorian for Brel's benefit and in court tongue for ours. And Brel listened to her with the bland courtesy of a man who knew his own words better than she did. At the cheese, Brel mentioned the walkout. It came as a half aside, almost rueful. He said that if the freight tariff schedule could not be revisited tonight, he was not certain the Commission could authorize a signature in the morning, and that the delegation might find it appropriate to withdraw and reconvene in Tasvar to take fresh instructions. He said it with the air of a man pained by his own duty. He did not look at the Chancellor when he said it. He looked at his cheese. The Chancellor was quiet for a long moment. I watched him put down his knife very carefully on the edge of his plate and lift his water glass and drink. The Whitmore delegation around him did not move. The interpreter rendered the line into court tongue and the room understood it for what it was, a hand on the door. The royal guard at the doorway did not move either. I want to be precise about what I saw next, because the precision of it is the whole story. Brel set his cheese knife down. He folded his napkin. He pushed his chair back the small ceremonial inch that means a man is preparing to rise. His two aides at his right and at his left made the same small movement a quarter second after him, the practiced choreography of a delegation that has done this before. He stood. The aides stood. The Chancellor rose because protocol required it. The Whitmore delegation rose. The hall rose with the small clatter of chairs on parquet. Brel inclined his head toward the Chancellor and said in court tongue with great formal regret that he hoped they might continue the discussion in the morning, after his commission had had a chance to consider its position, and that he thanked the House of Whitmore for a memorable evening. He turned toward the doorway. He had 4 paces to walk. He took the first, he took the second, he took the third. His aides walked half a pace behind him in their practiced fan. The royal guard at the doorway stood where he had stood for 2 hours, his eyes forward, his rifle shouldered, his gloved hand at his side. As Brel drew level with the doorway, the guard spoke. He spoke once. He did not raise his voice. He spoke at the calm conversational volume of a man passing the time of day, and the words came out of him in Cavorian, not the textbook Cavorian of the interpreter behind us, but the Cavorian of the southern coast, of the fishing wharves, of the customs office at Tasvar, with the small dropped vowel at the end of the verb that the dictionaries do not teach and the dialect carries. He said, "Tin man. They send a piece of decorative furniture who does not understand a single word we are saying. I will let them talk through the first 3 courses. At the fish, I will begin to find the renewal language unacceptable. At the cheese, I will mention a walkout. At the dessert, I will make for the door." He said it in Brel's own voice. He said it in Brel's own dialect. He said it the way Brel had said it 3 hours before, 3 paces inside the antechamber, with the small confidential smile of a man laying out his pieces. He did not look at Brel as he said it. His eyes stayed forward. The line came out of him as evenly as a man reading a paragraph he has known by heart since he was a child. The Cavorian language is a quiet language, and the words traveled the length of the table. The first thing I saw was the right-hand aide. He had taken half a step past his minister. He stopped with his weight on the front foot. His face, which had been carefully composed for the walkout, was suddenly the face of a man who has heard, in a place he believed safe, the sentence he himself had laughed at 3 hours ago. He did not turn. He froze on the front foot. The second aide stopped behind him. The third thing I saw was Deputy Minister Brel. He had been mid-step. He brought the foot down. He did not finish the step. He stood with his weight uneven and his face, that practical, carefully kept 50-year-old face, for 1 long second was the face of a man who has been comprehensively, methodically, surgically understood. He understood in that second every gesture he had made in 3 hours of dinner. He understood that the guard at the door had heard him in the antechamber, had heard him through the soup, had heard him through the fish, had heard him through the cheese, and had chosen the precise moment to give the line back. He understood, because he was an intelligent man, that the guard at the door had not been ceremonial furniture. He understood that the Chancellor of Whitmore now knew, in plain Cavorian, that his guest had bluffed him. He did not turn toward the Chancellor. He could not. I looked at the head of the table. The Chancellor had not moved. He had heard the line. I knew he had, because the Chancellor of Whitmore had read a brief in Cavorian every morning of his career, and there was a reason he had asked me, of all his aides, to be present at this dinner. He set his water glass down on the linen. He folded his hands in front of him. He waited. For perhaps 4 breaths, no one in the hall spoke. Then Brel turned. He turned toward the Chancellor with the slow deliberateness of a man choosing each muscle. He did not look at the guard. He could not yet. He inclined his head toward the Chancellor and said in court tongue that on reflection he believed the delegation could perhaps reconsider the freight tariff clause this evening after all, and that he hoped the House of Whitmore would accept his apology for the inconvenience of the past few minutes. The Chancellor inclined his head back. He said with great courtesy that of course they could reconsider. He gestured toward Brel's chair. Brel returned to it. The aides returned to theirs. The chairs in the hall settled back to the table with a small clatter, and the Chancellor's footman brought the dessert and the wine for it, and the renewal was reopened over the dessert with the freight tariff clause exactly as the Chancellor's drafters had written it, and Deputy Minister Brel raised no further objection to anything for the rest of the night. He did not look at the doorway again. The signature took place at 1:15 in the morning, in the Chancellor's private study, on the Chancellor's terms. The freight tariff schedule was signed as drafted. 2 further clauses that the Cavorian delegation had been quietly resisting for 3 months were settled in our favor before the ink was dry. Deputy Minister Brel signed each page in a small, exact hand. His aides did not speak. As they were leaving, Brel paused at the door of the study and looked, for the first time since the doorway of the banqueting hall, in the direction of the royal guard, a different guard now on the next rotation, and said nothing, and went out into the corridor. By morning Tasvar had recalled him. The Cavorian Commission released a short statement that he was being reassigned to a domestic portfolio, and a new delegation lead would be appointed within the month. No one in either capital said in print what had happened at the dinner. No one had to. The terms of the renewal were public. That was language enough. The next afternoon, in the corridor outside the Chancellor's study, I saw the guard from the doorway again. He had been brought up from the watchroom in his ceremonial dress. A senior officer stood with him, a small man with a gray mustache and 3 discreet ribbons under his lapel, whom I had never met and whose face was the face of a man one was not meant to know. He addressed the guard by his true title. He said, "Thank you, Captain Ellery. The section will rotate you out of the door at the end of the week. We owe you a quiet evening." I learned afterward from the Chancellor what the title was. Captain Marcus Ellery of the Linguistic Intelligence Section, on standing rotation through ceremonial doorway duty as part of an arrangement which the bureaucracy of Whitmore calls, in its understated way, the Standing Diplomatic Protection Asset Program, the quiet practice by which a man trained for years in a foreign tongue and dialect is placed, for a single charged evening, in the immaculate red wool of the ceremonial guard at the doorway of a dinner where everything depends on what is said when no one believes anyone is listening. There were 5 such men on the rolls. Captain Ellery, I gathered, was the one whose Cavorian was indistinguishable from a man born on the southern coast. He had chosen his moment. He had heard Brel in the antechamber. He had heard him through the soup, through the fish, through the cheese. He had not spoken when Brel mentioned the walkout. He had not spoken when Brel stood. He had not spoken when Brel turned for the door. He had spoken at the doorway on the threshold when Brel was committed to the move and could not retreat from it without losing his footing, and he had given the line back not as a threat, not as a taunt, but as a calm report of the record. The whole table had heard it. The Chancellor had heard it. The bluff had died on the threshold. I think about that often. I think about the discipline of having heard, in the first 10 seconds of the evening, the entire plan laid out at 3 paces in your own perfect command of the man's own tongue, and choosing not to speak. I think about the discipline of standing for 2.5 hours with that knowledge inside your bearskin and your tunic, knowing that the bluff is coming, knowing that the moment will arrive, choosing to wait for the exact step at which a single quiet sentence will collapse the whole structure. There is no luck in that. There is no flourish. There is the trained patience of a man who has been told to hold his post and to choose his moment. Captain Ellery, by the end of that week, was rotated off the doorway and into the next assignment. I do not know what it was. I am not meant to know. I saw him once more, briefly, in the courtyard of the House of Whitmore on a morning of late autumn rain, in a plain dark coat, walking with the same level eyes he had brought to the doorway. He did not see me, or he did, and chose not to. The discipline of the man at the door is the discipline of being unseen until he is needed. I keep on my desk now the placement card from that dinner. It has the Deputy Minister's name on it, and the Chancellor's and mine and the seating, and at the very edge, in a small neat hand that I did not at first notice, the inked initials of the duty officer who had written the doorway watch roster that evening, M.E., and the small annotation in the margin in the same hand, Cavorian Southern Coast, nothing else, no flourish. He stood the post, He chose the moment. He said one quiet sentence. The room understood it. The negotiation collapsed into the host's terms. The delegate was recalled. And the man at the door, when the week was out, walked away from the doorway and into a corridor I am not meant to know, in a plain dark coat with his eyes forward, and his face the face he had brought to the post. The face of a man who has been trained, for years, in the small ferocious discipline of saying nothing until the exact word will do the whole work of an evening. I will tell you the truth. In all my years at the table, I have never heard a single sentence do more.